You're good.
Okay, thank you. Let's call to order. Could we get a roll call, please? AJ?
Chair Watson, I did hear from him. He has work, so he will be absent today. Vice Chair Emmelhuns.
Here.
Member Strom.
Here.
Member Chisholm.
Here.
I did hear from Member Johnson, also work, and he will not be here tonight. Member Hughes.
Here.
Member Hart.
Here.
And our alternate member Somerson, I did hear as well that he would not be attending. So we do have a quorum.
All right, great. Let's take a look at the minutes from our January 15th meeting. Does anybody have any clarifications or corrections to those? Okay, hearing none, can we approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving minutes?
Aye.
Aye. And I believe we have no public forum. We have no one. Is there anyone online that we know of?
There's none.
Okay, on to the 2024 end of year report. Somebody have a copy? There's a couple floating around.
Everyone should have a copy.
Okay. I'd assume Dave was going to do this. Is he not going to do this?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Answering any questions you have, since you did get it ahead of time, hopefully there's more questions than what I can go through. I can run through it real quick if you need to.
Okay. Can you do a high level on it and just anything that you say, look at and say, hey, this is, standing out to us or whatever, and then we'll just chime in?
Yeah, absolutely. Our trends from 2023 to 2024 are pretty similar. The difference in 2024 is we were down staff, specifically with our seasonals. Our one dedicated seasonal going into this summer was reassigned, and then we weren't able to get our second seasonal, which ended up being our only seasonal until a little bit later. So it was a later start. We were lucky enough to be able to keep that seasonal on a little bit later this fall to help out. So our numbers for weeds and right-of-way are going to be a little bit smaller just because of the shortness of staff in that area.
I noticed that actually the weeds looked almost identical to last year. I mean, it seems like you were able to cover it, or at least to the degree that you did last year. And the fact was the previous year was such a rainy year, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, our full-time code officers really did pick up a lot of that, trying to get around the rest of the city. Since we did start later, we did have to make up for that the first about 2 months of the growing season. Moving forward, for referrals, how we receive the calls, it's still about where we were the past few years, right around that 75% officer initiated, and then moving in concerned citizens and dispatch are our seconds. No big changes there. The next one is for the seasonal. As you can see, weeds is the majority of it. We did start park ranger. We were short a park ranger all spring. We did hire one full-time as we got into the summer, and they were trained and out on their own by early fall. So those numbers for parks are a little bit down as well, just because we were just operating with the code officers without that park ranger as well. And then the final couple pages, I believe last year was the first year you actually saw the report breakdown. So this is actually how we can pull the numbers from our report management system with how it was requested for the park rules on the last page, that breakdown that we did a year and a half ago, as well as all the other code enforcement versus animal control with how received, and then how those are broken down as well by parks for those park violations.
I'm going to jump back to the first page real quick. This is more of curiosity. Where is most of the graffiti that you come across?
So probably 90% of graffiti is gonna be on some sort of public property, either that's CDOT, city, parks, something like that. Occasionally, less often, we will get it on private property for like fences, buildings, that type of deal. But mainly it's along our major thoroughfares, and then in our parks, our public spaces is where we see those.
Any questions from the first page? I'm just going to take this page by page here.
I just had a general question. The 75-25 rule, like 75% of the responses are initiated by the officer, 25%. What meaning do you give that? Does that stay the same year after year after year? Would you rather see it as a different ratio, but you know, it's like a 75-25 ratio? Is there any, what do you make of that?
So the ratios from what we've seen nationally, through the national conference and talking, you always want to be more proactive. That's how you keep a cleaner community, that's how you get more involved in the community, and that's actually how you reduce your violations, is to be out there, being the proactive, getting those minor violations before they become larger issues. So that's with proactive is extra patrols of the parks. Proactive is going out there and talking to businesses about snow shoveling. It's working with residents. It's going out there and actually being that voice, being that, hey, we're going to work more on the education side than the enforcement side. So we'd like to see that ultimately higher. I'd say probably 80-20, but realistically, just with staffing and just calls for service, especially the animal control side, those are always going to be reactive most of the time just because of their nature.
Okay. So we're in a healthy range. You see 75-25, that's.
Yeah, when I first started, we were, I want to say just about 50-50, just under, actually more reactive than proactive.
Okay.
And that's because when I started, we were down to 2.5 officers in the department, so it was pretty much only reactive work.
Okay.
And then building it up to where we're at, probably the last 7 to 8 years, we've built it back up to that 60, 70, and we've been holding about that 75% range for at least the last 5 as far as I'm aware.
I'm going to ask a subjective question maybe. Do you feel that the staffing currently is adequate, subpar, fantastic? I mean, and I'm asking you for your opinion, okay? I mean, just I'll kind of, because you're on your boots on the ground, but where do you see it? Is there more that could be done if you had another FTE or something that could be on the ground doing more? Is it significant?
Adding another FTE, there's always more that can be done. There's always things that are getting missed. There's always things that are on the back burner. When I first started, weeds were on the back burner. If we did 10, 20 weed cases a year, that was a lot. Just because that wasn't a priority, that we didn't have the manpower at the time to do that. Looking forward 5 years from when I started, we never stepped foot in the park. Unless we were called, we never stepped foot in the park. Priorities changed. And that's where we now have a park ranger, and that has become a priority because it became an issue. So to answer your question, what we have with our expectations, we're managing. We could always use more with expectations. If it's reduced, it would be more work, but ultimately that would be up to city council and city leadership to decide. But with what we have now, it's managing. If we had more, absolutely we could do more as well.
Thank you. Anybody else on the first page? Let me move on to the second. Is there anything in the first paragraph there that anybody has questions?
When it says calls for service, does that include online?
Calls for service are all calls for service. So proactive, reactive, from citizens, from officer initiated, from dispatch, everything is included. Yeah, and that first graph includes the seasonal officer numbers, and the second graph just includes the folder.
But it can be it can be online.
Yes.
So can I, on these two graphs, the one with seasonal officers and excluding, were there less total numbers? Or what is really the difference? Is it the time when the seasonal officer was here, what you were able to accomplish, versus when the seasonal officers weren't here?
So the one with the seasonal officers is all the cases with full-time code and seasonal on the graph showing total amount of cases. The one excluding the seasonal officer just removes what the seasonal officer did. Just so you can see the difference of what the seasonal officer adds versus just what the full-time code has. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe a goofy question then, but would it make more sense to have a graph that showed the seasonal officer's effectiveness on its own, so we're not trying to extrapolate by subtracting one from the other?
The seasonal officer is so specific in what they do, I don't think that graph would show anything because their 100% focus is weeds and grass and right of way. So that's all that it would show.
Okay.
On the bar graph section for the full annual report, so under the grass and weed section, that 4,728 number and the right-of-way number, the 259, are the only ones that the seasonal officer would have any influence on.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Clarify for me then also, citizen concern and dispatch. Our dispatch, aren't they receiving citizen calls too?
They are, but it's how it comes into our office. Is it a citizen contacting us directly, or are they contacting 911, or are they contacting the non-emergency dispatch number to reach dispatch? We're actually putting up a call for service, and then we're getting dispatched.
Page 12 on the second chart here, the January had 190 nuisances. Everything else all through there is down in the 20s or below. Why 190 nuisances in January? Any idea?
I'd have to go back and check.
Is it like, would those have been ones from the people who were firing off, fireworks on the first of the year?
It possibly could have, depending on how it was identified in the system for a nuisance.
That's a lot.
I'd have to go back and see.
It's a big number. Okay. Well, I mean, if you can find it, that'd be great. It just kind of stood out.
Yeah, it's almost like an anomaly.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like an anomaly.
On that second page also, where it talks about case status closed under abated, what types of abatements were these?
So anything that's abated would be anything that's abated by the city. So that could be something as simple as a garage sale sign attached to a traffic control pole where the city's physically removing and disposing of that. It could be an illegal sign in a park. It could be an actual ordered abatement for grass and weeds, snow, trash. It could be part of the nuisance RV, where a vehicle's been towed, because we're physically removing that vehicle, we're abating that situation. So that's anything would be in the abated category would be part of that.
Okay, and then under impound, are these all dogs or cats, or are they something else?
Impounds are all animals, correct?
Okay,
That's only animals.
okay, and then summons pending down at the bottom of that. What does that mean?
So summons pending at the end of the month when the report's pulled, if there's any cases where the case has run its course, but officers either need to issue a summons or decide next steps, that's where the summons pending would come from, where the case is, the timeline's over with, we're just trying to contact an owner, a resident, something like that, to actually issue a summons to court.
Okay, and so are these that are still pending included in, would they be under things that are abated or?
No, those would be their own category. The following, they may end up changing into like a summons issued
Okay,
at a later date. It could also change into like a non-compliance or an in-compliance, something where they did end up bringing the property back into compliance before a summons was issued. That's an option that we have, is to forego the summons at that point because the property is in compliance.
okay, so would they be included in the 278 on the first page where it lists summons under the total cases?
No, because that's a separate item. So each month, each of the closed statuses are pulled and they don't overlap at all. So they're completely separate numbers.
Okay, and then under the abatements, are all of these administrative or judicial?
Most of these would be administrative, partially. Some of them would be, like I said, signs that are removed, which are considered administrative abatements because they're on city property. So they'd be administrative abatements and outright abatements because it's in violation.
Okay, so, I mean, could that include political signs like during elections, or is that different?
If the signs are on like the right of way or on city property or parks, that would be included in the abated.
But we just do those, we don't charge anybody for
Correct.
that, correct?
Yeah, just like when you saw me pulling signs off the light pole,
Mhm.
that report would be closed as abated. In case the owner of that sign came forward and say, hey, my sign's gone, it cost me $100 to put up, then that's where we can do a report. No, this is where it was, this is where it was located. It was abated and disposed of.
Okay, and I mean, I know with political signs, they generally get delivered to the clerk's office and then the clerk calls the person and tells them where they were, right?
There's a time frame that the city keeps them and then gives them back. I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, any political signs are kept until the end of that political process, and then any unclaimed are disposed of at that point.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mike, anything?
Probably a closing comment. It looks like it's parks, weeds, and animals take up most of the time and energy. And I guess my question, AJ, is, are there any red lights flashing when you look at this? Is there anything jumping out at you that you say, I wish something could be done about this, that, or the other?
I'm not quite sure, like for staffing or for calls for
Well,
service.
You're doing it, okay? So this is your world. So when you look at that report, you say, oh, all's quiet on the Western Front, everything's cool. Or you go, dang it, those numbers confirm my suspicions. There's a problem, there could be a problem over there. I mean, so it's like what's your analysis or opinion on these numbers?
So based on the numbers, parks, animal control, and then our seasonal violations, so our weeds and our snow and ice
Okay.
are the biggest. And those are the expectations that have been brought forward. Like I said, when I first started, weeds were not even a thing we worried about because we didn't have the staff for it. That has since changed. So has some of our other numbers suffered because of that? Yes, just because our focus has changed. That's what we've been directed to do. That's where our focus is. It's grass and weeds when it snows. And we're out there for the remainder of the storm trying to hit the whole city before it melts off with complaints, issuing those notices. But that takes us away from the inoperable vehicles. That takes us away from the trash. Given depending on the amount of snow, we may not have a lot of the other violations that we could even see.
Okay.
So there is a trade off, especially with snow, that of course, if we get like the bomb cyclone, when we get 3 or 4 foot of snow, all we're going to be doing is snow for several weeks because 1, we can't see the other violations, and 2, that's our priority at the time.
So you're saying this is, stability is in the system. You're saying there's nothing out of control. There's no blinking red lights when you look at this. Say it's pretty much under control.
Based on the past, I'd say 4 years that we've had stats like this, yeah, it's running its course. We're pretty similar with some change of expectations, of course, weather dependent. When we changed park rules a few years ago, of course, our park cases went way high because now we're educating on all the change of rules. Those numbers are going to go up again here when we change from winter hours to summer hours again. So it is seasonally, but it's trending year to year very similar.
And then I do have another question about the impound of dogs. What is the process for people to get their dogs back?
So if a dog is impounded at large, just say basic at large, the dog or cat would be impounded at the shelter. At that point, once an owner is identified, I'll step back. If an owner can be identified in the field, which unfortunately is very rare, microchips aren't updated, they're very hard to access. A lot of people don't have tags with updated phone numbers. We don't have any system here in the city that we can actually look up microchips license. We don't have any licensing. So if we can identify an owner, we'll absolutely try to return it. That saves everyone time, money, effort, all that. If it's a repeated dog or we can't identify an owner, it will get transported to the shelter. Shelter staff is tasked with trying to identify an owner. They've got a great system, a database that they can use. They may know the dog. They may have adopted the dog. They can look up microchip history, do a little bit more research and time hands-on than we can. Once an owner is identified, they'll reach out and say, hey, is this your dog? Because they may have sold it. We don't know. If we have located an owner, then they're directed to meet with us. We'll go ahead and issue them an at-large ticket to the Violations Bureau. And then after the Violations Bureau ticket's been issued, they can go pick up their dog from the shelter.
Okay, is there any document that's provided so people know the process?
An actual, like from the city or?
Right, from the city or from the shelter?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I think most people know to call either animal control or call the shelter in their area
So
if they've lost their dog.
the reason I'm asking this question, because a few years ago, when the dog got picked up and taken to the shelter, the people, when they were called by the shelter, were told that they had to go to the police department to pay a fee before they could get their dog back. Is that still part of the process?
So for the fee portion, the city does not collect any fee at time of summons. That's all done through the court process. The fees are set. The city does not collect any fees until the court process goes through. However, the shelter does charge an impound and a daily care fee, but that is all civil. That's set by the shelter. So yes, we will issue a summons. Then they will go down to the shelter, and then the shelter does have a fee. How the shelter administers that fee is all under their policy. So for an example, if a dog's only been out, say for 2 hours, the owner shows up, gets a ticket and goes down, the shelter may waive that completely. Versus a dog that's been there for day 6 of day 7 before the owner loses custody of that dog, then the shelter most likely is going to charge them their impound fee plus their daily care fee.
Okay, so here's my problem, and this is, I don't know if we're still doing it this way. If you didn't know who owned the dog, and that's why you took it to the pound, they were requiring the pound to send the people over to the police department, and they got ticketed when they were at the police department because they had an at-large dog. Is that still happening
For the people that turn in the dog or for the owners of the dog?
for the owners of the dog? When they go to pick up their dog once the shelter notifies them?
Yes, the shelter will direct them to contact us before even showing up. If they do show up, then the shelter will normally call us. If we have someone in the area, we can go down to the shelter. Otherwise, they'll direct them to the PD. And then we'll issue the summons, and at that point, they can pick up their dog.
What's a summons when you're saying a summons?
Ticket.
A ticket?
And so, I mean, generally, we have the right to be confronted by the police when we have violated the law. If you're basically suggesting that through the shelter, the people have to go down for you to give them a ticket.
They have to come see us.
Yes, right, that's what she said.
Right, and I think that's a problem. Why? What way? Because it may not always be a problem, but I do think that sometimes it is. It has to do with citizens' due process rights. About, like, generally, and part of the reason the current council hasn't gone with, you know, the electronic tickets for cars, you know, they have a van sitting on the side of the road and they send tickets, is because your constitutional right is to be confronted by an officer of the law when you're speeding. And so I think maybe that's something this, you know, this committee should talk about. Is it, because what is the fine for an at-large dog? And do they have to go to court?
No, they don't have to go to court. It is just a violations bureau unless it's a repeat offender. And then that's all set by the court. I'm not sure what the current fine breakdown looks like, but I believe first fine was fairly low. I want to say under 30. I'm not quite sure, but I know it was fairly low for first violation.
Okay, is that something you could find out, or no?
I believe it's posted down in court.
I don't have the fee information.
So is it in the fee schedule that we
Yes, it is.
decide? Okay.
So, in simple terms, it's never free. I get a puppy, the puppy gets out, I panic, I make phone calls, and in 2 hours, I want to pick the dog up. It's gonna cost me some money.
Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There's no forgiveness on that first time offense. You know, the dog escaped, the owner's panicky, being responsible, wants to get it. It's gonna cost the owner something to get the dog back. $30 or something.
You can
No,
waive
not
the
necessarily.
No,
Like I said at the very beginning, if we can return the dog,
Yeah.
if the dog has a tag with an
Okay.
updated name, a phone number, we've come across several times where the people are out looking for the dog.
right.
And we just happen to be in the area, a neighbor calls, say, hey, I found this dog. All right, great, we'll come, we
Okay.
load it up. And there's a car that drives by and goes, hey, wait, that's my dog. Absolutely, we're gonna get their information, we'll still do a report on it, but we're gonna give the dog back. There's not gonna be any summons issued, there's not gonna be any fines, because it's not
Okay,
going
well,
to the shelter.
Yeah, I mean, the person who leaves, if the dog's in the shelter for 6 days, that's a different story than the person who's trying very hard to get their dog back and be a responsible owner. So that makes me feel better. Thank you.
So do you know if the dog's only been there a couple hours? Well, actually, we had my grandson's dog for a while, and he got out, and the Denver pound caught him, and I think their policy was if you got there within 30 minutes, they didn't charge.
Since the shelter is private, and we contract with them, it's their full discretion on if they decide to charge that or not. That's not something that we have a say in. That's their full discretion through their shelter director and their board of when they charge and how they charge.
So the truth is, we have an agreement with the shelter that they're going to send people to the police department, Or does the shelter have the discretion just to release the dog if they choose to do so?
No, so our contract is that the dog, when it's impounded, is custody of the city. It's found property at that point. So it is officer discretion, either if it's a code officer, if it's a police officer, and we will notify the shelter of this is a summons hold, this is a court hold for a neglect, this is a no hold type of deal. That's the officer discretion to let the shelter know of what type of hold it is, and then the shelter will follow that process.
Okay, I mean, I actually agree with Mike. Our dog walked off one time, and I mean, the person that found the dog took him home, and he was chipped, and I think they called the vet because there was the tag on him was our vet, and the vet called. We had been searching frantically, and so I just went to pick him up. So there are citizens out there that will do that, hang on to the dog, and so.
Do you have chip readers?
We do. Unfortunately, a lot of the chip companies are becoming proprietary, and so there is no accurate way to search them. There is no master database to enter a chip number and find an owner. You have to go through the actual chip manufacturer to figure out what company it was issued to figure out if that chip was actually registered to, like, sold to a shelter to be implanted, and then it's contacting the shelter to see if they've updated the records since it's been adopted. It's a whole process, and that's why our shelter, they have those resources, they have that time, and the bigger databases to do that research to try to find the owner.
So you can't even tell when you read the chip, you can't tell what company it's through or who to call?
All we get is the actual chip number, and that's it. We get no other information.
So the bottom line is that the dog has a tag on it that has a vet's name on it, then you could get information that way.
Yep. Yeah, and tag and collar is required in the city. So
I'd like to at some point talk with you on that, see if we can make some changes with the companies on that.
that's what this group is for. I
I was
can't
gonna
make
say,
those changes.
If you feel that that's
a bigger
important.
thing than just a city,
Well,
but that's,
it is, but it's also something that we can initiate.
Yeah.
And so if you want to make a recommendation and we do that, we can ask that be put in the record, and then maybe not as we're doing this, but maybe we can kind of circle back on it and say, okay, let's make a change, or let's see what kind of change needs to be made. So if you feel strongly about that, I'd say let's get the opinion of the group here.
I'm not sure if we can, I'd like to talk with you and then maybe the next time ask for that, or we can research it, but I need more information on the chip companies and what's the best direction to go at it from, to get you so that you can get the information faster. And if it's necessary, but it sounds like the chip companies have a responsibility to make those chips available, to the people that those chips are for. And the people that buy those chips probably don't know that that's not happening. Because of microchips, that's important information. So, yeah, I would like to maybe look at that and see if we could pursue that in some way or get a direction to go.
Anybody else have feelings about that, Mike, Sonia?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I know it's a mess right now. I know that there's been a couple chip companies that have gone belly up.
Yeah,
And
there's been
they're
at least one.
asking people to re-register and just trying to find your information again. All the old paperwork from how many years ago, and
Right. And anybody can register any chip with AKC. They will take anybody's chip and register it through their database. I know that. But I've been away from that long enough that I don't know what the whole situation is. I know there was one company that did go belly up, and that's not right. So yeah, we're gonna get it.
And we've looked into that, and so if that's
Yeah.
something that maybe an April meeting, if we
Yeah,
talk about, I can add to the
Yeah.
April agenda since March is already filling up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You put that in, thank you. I think it's a good idea. I mean, this is the kind of thing that if we have an opportunity to kind of push the needle a little bit on something, make some kind of change, let's get it going.
Yeah, and it may go, not just the city, but it may help other places, the state, and even beyond that.
Absolutely. Anything else? Anything else off of the report that?
Well, I have a left field question. Fishing violations. Where are people fishing and where are they violating? What are the rules? I don't know that many places in Englewood where you could fish, unless I'm just confused.
Yeah, so all of them are Centennial
Centennial
Park.
Park and without a license.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I don't go there.
It's beautiful.
Are there fish in there?
It's well stocked.
There really are fish in there.
Yeah, it's a stocked pond, it's beautiful wildlife.
And so if you're licensed, you can fish legally there?
Yes,
Well, that's cool.
yes.
What
I didn't know
about
that.
children?
Yes.
No, but you can't fish for children.
So you can have a fishing derby at Centennial, okay, now I'm with that.
See, in Denver,
And so
children
so
can
people are
fish
there
in
without
large
fishing
ponds.
licenses? Is that what
So,
the
Centennial
state
Park is a
license.
city park, however, the water and the fish itself is regulated by Department of Wildlife.
Okay,
Since they stock it. So all Department of Wildlife rules and regulations apply, and that's built into our park rules and regulations, that anyone
Okay.
fishing Centennial Lake must follow
Alright.
state rules and regulations.
okay, thank you.
So does a kid have to
I
have a
need that
fire,
clarification.
fishing license?
I think
If
Are they-
they're under 15, they do not.
There's no
Okay.
fish in there.
But do they have to be with an adult that does have one?
As long as the adult is not fishing, the adult could be there helping, then the adult does not have to help.
Okay.
If the adult is fishing, then yes, the adult would be.
Does the kid doesn't
No,
have to.
under
No,
15.
Not
you
if they're
said.
under 15.
And David had talked about this before, cops and bobbers or something like that.
Yeah, that's right, I remember now, okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Is there any way we could start to track how many calls came in through Engelfix?
So, Anglefix itself, it has its own reporting data, and that's all done through IT and communications. They are able to see what calls come in, what types, graph all that. They can even do like hotspots around the city. That's outside of codes in the police department's purview. That's all done by IT and communications.
Okay. All right.
I got one more quick question for you. On the dangerous and at-risk animal control, how do you feel about the situation in Englewood on that number of calls? Do you feel like we've got a problem or on average?
In talking with surrounding jurisdictions, I think we have a fairly good handle on our numbers.
Okay, good.
I've got one quick one, and I just was trying to do some math on it. How many, I'm gonna use September because I'm gonna use that number in a second. How many people would be out in the field on a given day in September? Do you have any idea how many officers would be out there?
It depends on the day of the week, since we do offer 7-day coverage. Weekends are our lightest staffed. Thursday is 100% staffed currently. So Thursdays are overlap day for trainings, for staff meetings. So Thursday, it's all hands on deck. And then the rest of the time, staff is staggered, but most of the time, our minimum staffing is about a 2. We don't have a minimum staffing, but we try to keep at least 2 on during the week. And then weekends is either 1 or 2.
Okay, so I'm assuming like as in driving around, I'm looking at officer initiated. So you've got officers who are driving around, they see something, they're initiating an action. September says that there were 1,704 of those in officer-initiated contact. I'm dividing that out by the number of days in the month, and I'm getting over 50 per day. No, 500 per day. No, 50, I'm sorry, 50 per day. Sorry, my math, it's been a while. I only taught math for 30 years.
There's a 5 in there somewhere.
But Is that normal? I mean, are two people going to be able to initiate 50 contacts in a given day?
So if you look at the numbers starting in July through October, July is when we were training our seasonal. Starting August, September, October, our seasonal was out by themselves. Because the seasonal, their notices is the weed notice, the right-of-way notice, which has different expectations. That seasonal officer can do 20, 30, 40, 50 reports a day for cases where code officers are focused on larger issues that take longer to report.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense for that aberration. It's a huge number. It's like, how do they do that, you know?
Yeah, that's why those numbers are larger. It's because the seasonal does add to that.
Okay, and I have one last question and then I'm ready to move on. Going back to the last page, I noticed that if you go across to the parks incidents here, you count them over, you get to June, it's 248, you get to July, it's 277, August is 93, and then September jumps back up to 180, 190. Another aberration. I mean, this is half. Is there, I mean, that's high season in parks. Why would there be so many fewer or so few incidences?
So July, our park numbers soar, specifically for Bellevue Park because of 4th of July event and focused enforcement. August, believe it or not, with college kids going back to school and school starting up, we do see quite a bit decline in the park usage, especially during the week. It also depends on when school starts. Last year, school started the second week of August. That kids were back in school for the primary. I know they were in before the 15th. So that's why those numbers dip, because the actual calls for service for the parks goes down. And then once the kids are in school, yes, it does end up for some reason picking back up.
I was going to say.
But in August, we do actually see a decrease in our calls for service for a lot of our animal calls, as well as for our parks. On the opposite side of that, in August, we do sometimes see an increase in our dangerous at-risk calls because of the change in environment with dogs at home, because kids are leaving for college, kids are in school, so there is a correlation of events.
Interesting. Is that consistent year over year?
It
I mean,
is.
is it? It's interesting. Okay, thank you. Thanks for explaining. Any other questions?
Looks great.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
It's
Great
really
questions.
helpful. Good job.
And thank you, AJ.
Yeah,
Nice job. We have swearing in, I believe. There were re-swearing here, right?
yes, re-swearing in. Member Hart, I won't make you rise, but if you could
Okay,
raise your right
please.
hand. I state your name,
Linda Hart.
do solemnly swear or affirm
No, do solemnly swear or affirm.
I will support the Constitution of the United States,
I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the chartered ordinances of the City of Englewood,
and the charter ordinances of the City of Englewood,
and that I will, to the best of my ability,
and that I will, to the best of my abilities,
faithfully perform the duties
faithfully perform the duties
of office as a member of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee during my continuance therein.
break that into two.
As a member of the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee
As a member of the Code Enforcement Committee
during my continuance therein.
during
My continuance therein.
my continuance therein.
Perfect. And before you leave, I'll get you to sign these, and I have
Okay.
copies for you as well.
Okay, thank you.
And you get your Dakota badge.
Great.
And with swearing-ins, we do have 3 up for reappointment. If you received an email from me, you will be up for reappointment this next round. So the applications for that should be coming out within the next few weeks.
Okay, very good. Going on to council liaison. Rita, anything new?
I don't know that I really have anything to report on that involves you all. I think we're still trying to get the water bill straight.
That's a big one.
Keep up the good work.
Stay on it.
Oh, because mine's messed up, I do.
Yes, too. Okay, all right. Yeah, anything else? Anything come out of, didn't you have your retreat last month? Anything come out of that? Or?
Yes, we did have this just strategic planning meeting in January, and pretty much everything is kind of status quo. This is year 5 of a 5-year plan. And so I think what we're planning on is maybe a complete overhaul of a new strategic plan next year, because there will be a new council. So, yes.
Segueing into the new council, is it planned that there will be a mayoral election in November?
Yes, the mayoral election will be with the other council members. It's just that it's that one at-large seat. And so that will be the mayor's seat, and it'll just be on the ballot as election for mayor.
Okay. Are the same qualifications for mayor that as those for council, in that it's a 4-year term and that there are certain limitations? I mean, if you've been on council for two 4-year terms, could you run for mayor?
Yes,
You could.
you could. And so, because there's no stipulations there, mayor, the real thing that's changing is, well, a couple things. Currently, the mayor is elected by the council, and the mayor is replaced, comes up every 2 years. But just like all council seats, now the mayor will be a 4-year seat. And nothing else changed in the charter. As far as the mayor goes, there's still the figurehead for the city, signs all the paperwork, but they really have no more authority than any of the other council members.
The only difference being they're directly.
They're directly elected by the people rather than by the council, which I personally believe is good, because then you're more accountable to the citizens.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to subcommittees. You have a copy of the magazine article that is expected to show itself this spring.
It has.
It has, yeah.
It has. Oh, it has.
Here
I'm
it,
sorry.
here
I
it
didn't even see
is
the name.
in the publication.
In living color.
I saw it when I read the magazine a
Yeah.
week or so ago, and I thought, oh, this really turned out pretty well.
Pretty sweet. I love this. Yeah, that looks really nice. I like it. I like the graphic on there. It's very straightforward. Okay, and on to the next one, which is the review of the final draft of the welcoming letter. If you'll go down to the 4th bullet point on that, I simply added a sentence, and this was per Mike, I believe, that requested we clarify this. It says that grass, weeds, trees, and shrubs residents are required to keep grass and weeds cut to 6 inches or less. And then I added a sentence that said, this also applies to side yards and alleys on your property. Is that sufficient?
I want more. No, no, thank you. I think it's worth pointing out.
That's fine. That's great.
True.
Now, are you going to get this then to them?
Well, that was my next question. Can this, AJ, can you send this on to communications if
Yes.
you want me to? Okay.
I can.
All right, great.
If we just want to vote that we approve it to move forward, then I can absolutely send it.
Do we have anybody that would like to motion that this be approved? All right.
I motion.
Second.
Everybody's doing it. Okay. Those who approve the letter to move forward to the welcoming packet, say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor? Okay, it passes. Thank you. Right. And unfinished business, update from city attorney on vacant and abandoned properties request. Provide requested information on abatement costs for 2023, 2024. Code manager, from Code Manager D. Lewis. I believe we have a page toward the end of the packet there with the numbers. And I can't make heads or tails out of them, Becky, so can you explain what's going on?
The numbers will defer to AJ. The update I had, it was requested at the last meeting, information regarding how many vacant residential properties are in the city and their addresses, so I can pass that around to everyone. As of as of January 2025, this is the list of vacant residential properties within the city as identified by our chief building officer. And there are a total of 18.
Okay, there's 2 pages to it there.
It should just be 1 page.
You said they're 18, is that right?
Yes, correct. 18 in total, as of January 2025.
How many?
2.
2 pages?
Well, the second page actually printed
Yeah.
something else.
Oh.
Yeah, it really doesn't give
I'm
you-
sorry, that's just a.
All right.
When it says lot here, that's a vacant lot.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Vacant properties? Are you saying it's a vacant lot?
Yes, this is the information that was provided to us from the chief building officer.
Or is it a house that's vacant?
It is in a residential zone, so it will qualify as a residential lot if it's a whole lot that's abandoned versus just being, a resident, like a structure on the lot.
I'm unclear.
Me too.
If there is a structure that is abandoned in a residential lot, should that be on here?
Yes.
Okay, they're missing 2 on my block.
Okay, these are as of January 2025, so it's possible that it's something that's occurred within the last 30 days. It might not be picked up. My understanding is that the list,
They've been
generated-
abandoned for years.
well, it may be that the building official isn't aware of it. The list was generated from property maintenance cases. And also, so that's my understanding of how this list was generated.
From what?
Property maintenance cases that are open with the building office, with the building, community development and the chief building officer.
So someone had to complain about the property and then they went to.
Correct. There is an additional piece to that. The utilities billing department does refer cases to the chief building officer when water has been shut off at a premises for a certain amount of time. Because of the billing issues alluded to earlier, water is not currently being shut off within the city for non-payment or other purposes. So there may be a bit of a lag in some of the information that utilities has historically provided.
If these have been vacant for a couple years at least, and they have had their utilities discontinued for at least a year, both properties.
We can talk about that and make
Yeah.
sure that that information is
Yeah.
with the proper
Yeah.
authorities within the city.
Okay, so I'm confused on this. When it says a lot, does that include,
If there's
is
a
it
house.
totally vacant lot or is there a house on it?
If it says a lot, my understanding is that there is not presently a structure on it and it is just a lot, but it is located within a residential zone.
Okay, so why is a property that is just a lot on this list? Because there was an abatement against it or?
Because it is just identified as vacant and it is not being occupied or.
Well, if there's no house on it, why does it have to be occupied?
This is the,
It's a piece of
maybe another
property.
underlying property maintenance issue associated with it.
So like weeds or something and people.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, the city is paying to maintain, so that lot does not become something which is,
Okay, so there is an issue with the maintenance of the lot if it's on this list. Okay, that's
So
what I
these
wanted
are
to
problematic.
clarify.
I'm hesitant to say that entirely, but because it does come from property maintenance issues, that can be inferred.
Okay.
do we know if do they have ownership for these properties, or is this just people they can't get in touch with, and so they've had to step in and do maintenance on them to make sure that they don't catch on fire?
That's a good question. I can follow up to find out if there are those issues.
I'd appreciate it.
Well, there has to be somebody who
What-
owns it, but. it's
What
just
about
getting in touch
lots,
with them.
what about lots that have started development and then nothing happens for years?
If there's an underlying property maintenance issue, that would be picked up in this list.
But that's not considered a vacant.
That is a good question and I can follow up on. I'm not sure how that is being defined when this list gets put together.
What are you thinking, like a basement excavation or
Well,
actually
there are
building the
two,
structure?
these are in addition to the other ones. Two properties that are supposedly being developed, but they have raised the building on them. And they've moved around dirt to show that they've done something, but then done nothing for months and months and months.
I would think if there's an active construction permit, that it would not be identified as a vacant property on this list.
So
Okay.
is there a way,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, is there a way to find out if,
How do we know if it's active or?
Yeah.
Building permit.
if there's a permit or whatever?
Yes, the city should have one. We should have one that's open. It should be within our files so that we can trace that down.
How long
Are
is-
they, is there a certain period of time
Yeah, that was my
that they
question.
have to do to complete it? Or can they just wait on it for years?
That's a good question. And I would need to double check. Their stop work orders will be issued if there's a violation of a permit or if there's other kinds of code violations present within the construction. But whether or not there's a defined term and how long a permit is opened would be something I would need to check on.
And does this committee have anything to say about things like building permits? So in layman's terms, I think what we're struggling with is if there's an eyesore in my neighborhood and that house has been up on blocks for 18 months, shouldn't the city do something about that? That's one. Now, if that's a responsible developer and they're obeying the rules and it's taken 18 months, that's fine. I'm working on it. But I go back to absentee landlords and people who are untraceable. So as a resident, I don't want eyesores in my community, and I don't want out-of-state people or landlords or anybody else getting away with something that's irresponsible. My only question is, it seems like Englewood does not have clear codes. Trust me, in Centennial, Colorado, you can't have a job site under construction for 2 to 3 or 4 years. There's a time frame. You have to finish it. Does Englewood have that? Because I see what I think are unfinished jobs all over the place. And they've been around a long time. They look awful. And they don't help my property value. So I think, and again,
That sounds
are
like-
we the right committee
I
to
was gonna
be
say, it
asking?
sounds like a P&C question. I mean, it really comes down to how they handle and what their timelines are. and
Right.
things like that.
And then
So-
one of the questions that I think Linda brought up last meeting was, what do other municipalities do? There's got to be some benchmarks out there. And I want to be reasonable, and I don't want to be onerous with over-regulations, but drive down Cherokee Street and you will see what we're describing. And it's been that way a long time. So I would hope that could change.
So AJ, what section of the code deals with like development or like, I know we've talked about this on council before, where dumpsters have sat on properties for 5 years. Do you know what section of the code that would be covered under?
It's all Title 16, so it would be the code next that just passed, that all update. And then in reference to like how long permits are, that's all set up and established through the International Property Maintenance Code. And then through the Property Maintenance Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, of how long building permits are open, and then they can be renewed. And then some of them can be just closed as non-compliant, or there's no occupation that's been issued.
And if I can add to that, because I was looking at how, do we have something in our code regarding how long a permit could be open? That is in, it's Title 11, Chapter 7, and then Section 13 regarding time for completion. And in that section, it states all work covered by the permit shall be completed by the date stated on the application. So it is somewhat project dependent. However, permits shall be void if work has not commenced 6 months after issuance, unless there's been some sort of extension granted by the city. So we do have some requirements regarding permits in our code. But that, like I said, it is in Title 11, and so that does fall to a certain extent outside
So
of.
that's under Title 11, not so.
Yes, that permitting requirement, yes, correct.
So does this committee have, can they
Anything to say?
work on Title 11?
Don't we have enough, Rita?
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious, because the one thing that I know a frustration to a lot of people is empty dumpsters sitting there, and then the neighbors keep dumping trash in it, and
So under the bylaws, it's not, no. The only section of Title 11 that falls for this commission is snow and ice removal. That's 11-3-2. However, I mean, to the extent that construction is becoming a nuisance, I mean, that's where it would fall within the purview of this commission.
And that's where we do partner with building as well. If there's a property that, and that's what we always ask is there a current building permit? If there's a current building permit on a property, some of the code violations may not exist because they're allowed to do certain operations by the building permit. Now, if that permit has expired, if they have not began construction and our building department says, hey, that permit's no longer valid, or for example, that they violated that permit and that the city has put a stop work order, then that's where we would get back involved and we would go after the contractor, the builder, whoever that is, for the nuisance, for the outdoor storage, for those type of violations. So there is some overlap, but for the actual permit process itself and all the requirements for the application is Title 16. And then, for example, like the dumpster, that has been clarified in Title 16 now. So there is actually a timeline for dumpsters on property. However, if it is construction, as long as that permit's open and allowing a dumpster, that dumpster is even allowed outside of what Title 16 says. However, if it's not covered under a building permit, then yes, it would be Title 16. And that's where we would coordinate with community development for enforcement, since Title 16 is under their enforcement.
okay.
Are you notified by the building if something has changed on the property so that you know to move forward with, these codes?
Yes, most of the time, if we'll both be getting complaints about a property, and that's where we'll be working together. A larger property, it may go through the nuisance abatement team. If it's something a little bit smaller, that's where we're already in communication with our building inspectors of going, hey, what's the status of it? We're already getting the complaints. We know there's an open permit. There's certain code officers, Dave and myself have access to their system that all we can see is if there's been a permit issued or not. If there hasn't, that may be something we need to get them involved with to do a stop work order. If there has, that's where we'll get with them to make sure they're in compliance with their permit. That's not something we can determine. And if they are or are not, then that's where we coordinate with building to go after any enforcement. And most of the time with that, with our contractors, it is 99% of the time just to chat, saying, hey, you have a permit, you're not following, you're not being neighborly, this is what we need to correct. And most of the time they do it. The ones that don't, unfortunately, are the contractors that haven't started or partially started, ran out of money, went bankrupt, moved on, abandoned a property, and those ones do get a larger response either through nuisance abatement or some other action that's taken.
Alrighty.
Can I ask a question? We have some unusual circumstances on Corona Street. We have one lot that is sort of, quote, under construction, has been under construction. All they've done is move some dirt. That's what I guess they're doing that periodically to keep their permit active or whatever. But people have dumped things over the fence. So there is trash. In this case, it's wood, scrap wood, and it just sits there. Nothing is done. There's another situation where it is a vacant house, has not been started construction, and the neighbors are putting all their garbage cans in front of the house. And they are also putting their garbage. They're like big item pickup stuff, leaves. I noticed that leaves were dumped in the front yard of this supposed future development. They have a sign out there that it's going to be a future development, but the home was rented for some time, but has been vacant for a year now, and nothing done. So here we've got a dual problem here.
Get with me after and we can get the addresses. But yeah, there is
I'll
something
give you all the addresses.
there is something that can be done. Most of the time, if there is a permit that's just been issued, especially for properties that are in that condition, we do give some leniency to a new builder who just got a permit to get on the property to clean it up before they start construction. If it's a property that's been there for a year, that's ready to develop but hasn't, then there's still code requirements that they have to follow, and that we can absolutely enforce. So get with me after, we can get addresses and we can go from there.
Okay.
So is trash put in the other, front of the other property being picked up? Or is it just sitting there?
I think they move it across the street so they don't have to pull their trash cans out from behind their houses.
But is anybody taking the trash out?
I presume, well, not the big item stuff that's sitting in there. No,
Okay.
it's not.
Let's move on. AJ, can you elaborate these wonderful numbers we've requested there?
Yeah, so for the abatement cost for 2023, 2024, for 23, it was a total of $51,457 in total fees for abatements. That's what the city was charged by the abatement company. 2024 was $45,215. The admin fees is the fee that the city charges on top to cover all the other fees from the county to recording and all that. So $12,864 in 23 and $10,891 in 2024. So total invoiced, which would have been sent out to property owners, 2023 was the $64,321 and 2024 was the $56,106. Total received before lien, so those are properties that did pay their bill within the 30 days of receiving it, was the $6,000 and the $12,000 respectively for 2024. The next category, once it does get sent off for a lien, the county has their additional lien fees that they add on, which was the $14,000 and the $10,000 respectively. Recording fees is to actually record those liens with the clerk, the $845 and the $949 for 2024. And then the $73,000 and $55,000 respectively was the total liens that the county assessed on properties after all their fees were added. So totals received by the city after lien was the $17,305, and 2024 was the $168. So total outstanding for liens on the county side was the $56,417 and the $54,848. The $168 for 2024 is extremely low because our major abatement that occurred is actually still in process. So that has not actually finished up, and that why that number is still relatively low compared to the prior year.
Major, is it one project?
The largest one is just one project, yes.
So how many abatements occurred in 2024?
For this fee, I do not know. I'd have to get those numbers.
Okay, and you don't know for 2023 either?
I do
right?
not. I don't have access to that. That's all tracked by our finance department.
Is the bomb house included in the 2024, or would that have been 2023?
I believe that was 2023.
It should have been 2023.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, what is total OS stands for?
So total outstanding, that the county is still seeking in liens from those properties.
Okay, and so they have to wait until they're sold, or?
Either till they're sold, they're paid, or they go up for some sort of special sale, either tax sale or something like that.
So to review, I'll go back to the question I had last time. The city is not out this money because the county is the one who absorbs those abatement costs and things like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So does the city pay, does the county pay the city this full amount?
So yes, however, I believe it is before the county penalty fees. So the city would get paid back our cost plus our admin fees. So that total invoice number on line, what would that be, 5, I think, at the top, the 64 and the 56 is what the city would recover because that's our actual out-of-pocket for our invoice and our administrative fees to pay for the administrative side of it. The other fees, the county fees, the recording fees are set by the county. Basically, it's the county fees on top of to recover the lien.
So at the end of 2023, the city was still waiting on 64,000 minus 6,000. And at the end of 23, the county was still waiting on 56,000, correct?
So the city would have been paid by the county.
But
And then, so the only money outstanding would be owed of that 56,417.
so the city's made whole?
Correct.
Okay, and so I imagine 2023 and 2021 still have some outstanding as well
That would be owed to the county.
to the county.
Correct.
So through this process, the city's made whole
Correct.
and the county's footing the bill.
Correct. That's where they have the county penalty fees. That's where those are included.
Okay.
So
And the
these have
county
been
has
paid.
the right to that money on the property, so they have a lien, they hold the lien, so they're not out
Mhm.
once that property sells. Yeah.
But the city has already received these funds.
Correct.
That was my initial question last time, was, is the city sitting on a lot of
Yeah.
debt here that they can't collect? But apparently the county picks that up. Thank you. Any other questions about this, guys? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you pulling it together.
And to go back real quick if we can, on the nuisance numbers for January, I went back real quick through the numbers. Those numbers are inflated. That was the January that we did have the excessive snow right there at the beginning of the month. So those numbers for the 190 for nuisance was actually business nuisance enforcement for snow and ice. Along the city's major corridors that was requested. So those were tagged as a nuisance because those were our businesses failing to clear the snow and ice, creating a nuisance for our citizens and for our visitors along our major corridors. So that's why that number is inflated due to that special snow event that we had pretty much back to back in early January. And then it was that requested enforcement for the businesses.
Thank you.
So that's why it's a different number, and it was excluded from the snow and ice specifically because it wasn't targeted on the business nuisance side.
Okay, perfect. You know, when you see a number like that, it's like,
Give me time, I'll try to find it.
there you go. Hey, we need to make a decision, team. We have on our agenda to continue with Title 15 review, beginning with 15.4.1. I'd like to say that it is 7:18. We've been here for a little while, and do we want to continue with this? Or do we want to table this for next month, or what you think?
I'd just soon table it unless somebody feels strongly the other way.
And for next month, we do have 2 scheduled meetings already. The judge has requested from last month's meeting, was not able to make this. There was a conflicting on his schedule, but he is confirmed for March 19th to attend. And then as well, the Sustainability Commission does want to come and talk to CEAC. So they are on the schedule as well for the March 19th.
The advantage to doing it now is it would allow us opportunities to add some questions to approach the judge with next month, because a lot of this is in the thick of a lot of the court-related stuff. However, that also being said, I went through it this afternoon, and I tell you, every other word I'm looking up. So it's kind of tough to get through if you haven't already been through it. You've been through it, right, Linda? Did you go through it?
Yeah, I went through it too, and I was the same way. I want to hear how the court system handles it, and then I'll know the questions to ask. Because this is something I've always wondered about this part of it, how the court handles the,
We could, basically prep so that we're ready to go. And I mean, I've got notes along the side of questions and things, and then maybe use those as springboards to talk to Joe about, how this is handled, or maybe clarification. I mean, we want to just put that as part, kind of combine both his time here with kind of a review of this. Would people feel comfortable doing that?
You mean do it
In conjunction
with his,
use the part of his expertise to kind of address questions. Obviously, Vicky's here too, but it might be interesting to see his perspective on it from the court side.
I think it would help immensely to have his input.
Okay, you want to table it then? Okay. All right, we'll table it for next month. No other new business. And committee members' choice, anything anybody wants to bring up? Okay, is that it? Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much. We're adjourned. Thank you.